Hello and welcome to my latest weekly video news from Madison's. Well, of course, mortgage rates are everywhere in the press at the moment. It's all that we're talking about in the world of property. And why is it that it's upsetting people so much? Well, of course, it is much, much more expensive. And there's a few things that have created a perfect storm around the mortgage market. So first of all, of course, in the pandemic, we had lots of people reevaluating home, and lots of those people took out 2-year mortgages. They were really attractive, at 1.5%, something like that. An average mortgage, say £400,000, that would cost you £500 a month now. When those mortgages come to expire, and there's predicted there's going to be a huge glut between July and October of this year, huge glut of those 2-year mortgages starting to roll off. That 400,000 mortgage will rocket from £500 on the interest-only element, up to about £1,700. So that's a big hit for most families to want to take. And of course, more talk that rates might still go further. So those number of fixed rates that are rolling off is becoming quite concerning. And lenders are looking more and more at the cost of living rises. So inflation is stubbornly not shifting very much. And there's a fear that those high prices are becoming embedded in the UK economy. What that means is retailers understand that people are happy to pay them, so they don't therefore reduce them when wholesale prices to them reduce. They continue to make those great margins. So with those high prices, lenders are concerned about what inflation is going to continue to rise at and what that could therefore mean for long-term borrowing rates. The easiest way for the Bank of England always to address it is simply to raise interest rates, but that's just not really working at the moment. Sorry, I've got something in my eye. So it's proving quite difficult at the moment, and that's why there's so much chatter around mortgages at the moment. It's a difference to what it was, those maturing mortgages, cost of living rises, and inflation just staying stubbornly high. Interestingly, in coming up to retirement, the average age to repay your mortgage now is age 60, and 1 in 10 people expect to have a mortgage pulling into their retirement. Now, when rates were really low, that wasn't such an issue. And to a degree, one of the big problems we've all created or got used to is having a historically low interest rate environment. 2008 rates started to go down. So 15 years, they sat at artificially low rates, and that has become the norm. So people looking at all sorts of different mortgages to carry them into their retirement, whereas before that looked like quite cheap money, now that's quite expensive, and that can have a real impact for people approaching retirement where your income is reduced against being employed. So lots going on in the mortgage world. Property market though, still absolutely booming. We are so busy. I was at sealed bids on a property yesterday. I'm about to take another one to sealed bids probably today. I've got initial offers above asking. So there's still definitely buyers who need and want to move and are just pressing on with their plans regardless. And I suppose one of these factors we see in this new market is what's called the unproceedable buyer. So the buyer who can't yet proceed. Now, during the pandemic, the government came out and said that we really could only show buyers who had an intent to make an offer. And many agents interpreted that to mean that they had to be in a position to proceed. Of course, you can make an offer whether you can proceed or not. It's just not taken particularly seriously by an agent until you can proceed. So as a result of that, and because of the hype in the market, you often didn't do viewings with buyers who couldn't proceed. There was simply no point, quite frankly, as well. The pandemic was typified by what was called the power buyer. So this buyer who could secure that property they wanted because they were in a really great position, and anybody who had a property to sell, even if they were under offer and in a very short chain, didn't stand a chance, to be honest. So a lot of those sellers who were planning to move, put their house on the market, sold that really quickly but then couldn't find, they just put all their property moving plans on hold. They took their property sale, they withdrew it, decided to let the market calm down, and now they're coming back to market and they haven't yet sold. One of the challenges is if they sold last year, they probably won't get the price they got last year. So that's a tricky one for a seller to get their head around when they've got a better price before. You need to understand it's relative and your onward purchase will be less as well. But that's a difficult one to get your head around. But also now they're just not finding they get a buyer as easily as they did before. So in the pandemic, it was a pure seller's market. Everything was selling, and now it's a buyer's market, so it takes a little bit longer. But I always think it's really good and natural to let unproceedable buyers see properties. It's the way that you become excited about a move. You see something you like, you can imagine yourself living there, and so you sell your property. For sellers, it can be frustrating when you have a batch of viewings or just one that's to a buyer who can't proceed. So we always try to clump them together to keep the hassle of tidying up for a viewing down to a minimum. But generally, I think it's a good thing. That non-proceedable buyer might be on the market at the moment, and they might see a property that makes them motivated and they reduce their price, or they might take their house to market, which would always sell in any day of the week. So there's lots of reasons why I think you need to help buyers who are non-proceedable become proceedable. I think it's not a bad thing. It's how the market functions normally, but it's certainly what we're seeing more of at the moment. Well, we have taken some gorgeous properties to market. What about this lovely flat, Hetton Lodge? It's a beautiful ground floor apartment in Ferndale on at a guide price of $650,000. Lovely private garden and additional access to a communal garden and off-road parking, exquisitely presented. And also, other end of the scale, what about this glorious big property over in Nettlestead on at a guide of 1.7 million? It's got so much potential and space there. You've got a big house, you've got an annex, it's presented really well, lots of land, paddocks, gardens. This house is excellent value for money, and the most stunning countryside setting. So if either of those very different properties are of interest to you, please give me a call. Have a great week. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.